the Shoestring program, and Mimi Commissioner can explain a little bit more about what that program looks like and how it's working for us now.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. We do have a contract with Zoom. It is a small contract. It is to transport the students from the Shoestrings program, which is an early education tier 3 intervention. Many of you have come out to see it already. They are transporting students who are general ed students between the ages of 3 years old and 5 years old. It's on 10 weeks. It's on a 10-week cycle. Currently, it's 6 kids, but it can be up to 10 kids for every 10-week cycle.
And are there any, can you speak to the changes that are happening from this year to last year with the existing first student contract? Is the level of service going to be consistent, increase?
Thank you, Commissioner. So the contract for Zoom that's before the board tonight is for 10 vehicles. And for first student, it's 230 vehicles. So we're still contemplating that all of our students will get to, the majority of our students will get to and from school on the large yellow bus. We are reducing the amount that we're proposing to spend on transportation in general next year by about $2 million. And some of that will be achieved by optimizing routes and schedules and trying to design hub routes. And some of it will be achieved by seeing if we can start to explore some of the services being covered by van service instead of by yellow bus. So for example, the students who are 18 and older that are part of the CAP program. I hope that's answering your question.
I'm specifically interested in finding out if we're going to be consistent from this year to next year with our first student service, or is it decreasing or increasing?
We are hoping to decrease it because we can't continue to sustain, regardless of the direction we go, we can't continue to spend as much money on transportation services. So we're looking for ways to build in efficiencies in order to reduce the amount we're spending on transportation.
Okay. And so for our existing contract with first student, what's the amount that we spend on transportation per year?
So this year it's budgeted at $32,286,000 approximately. And what we're asking the board tonight is to approve a contract for $30 million. So that's $2,286,000 less than what we're currently budgeted for. And we're hopeful that we can achieve the services for students at that price.
And not to say that these two are connected, but what is our existing deficit? Is it the same number? It's 32 million? Yeah. Okay. And how much of the existing deficit is attributed to our transportation costs? Not really connected at all. I mean, I know we talked about this last week. I'm just we talked about spending at a deficit year over year.
Right. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but that figure is related to a variance in our current year falling short of our required fund balance, of which we've identified solutions except for $8 million, which we're still in the process of identifying. So I don't think that any of that is specifically related to an unexpected variance in transportation costs, but correct me if I'm wrong, Ms.
That's right. For current year, we're not anticipating going over what was budgeted. So it's not as though the kind of change this year is as a result. But I will say that the cost is increasing every year. So since 2015, the costs for transportation have gone up by 38%. So we've gone up as far as 32 million, right? Last year, I think the year before was at around 30 million. And so that we were on an upward trajectory. What we want to do is turn it into a downward trajectory, so we don't keep continuing to spend at that rate.
And how long has Zoom existed?
I'm not sure how long Zoom has existed, and I also didn't, we didn't invite any of the providers whose contracts we're putting forward tonight to come, because the process that we went through to select Zoom was, we want to move in the direction of van, we have to go out to bid. We had all these requirements, driver requirements, vehicle requirements, and First Student bid on vans as well, as did another company. And when the proposals were evaluated, it was determined that Zoom was the best value. So in other words, their approach to, their track record and approach to safety, their student-centered proposal, and the price point, like meeting all of the requirements that we had put out for van service. They met all of those requirements and were the best value provider. I do know with regard to Assembly Bill 5, which some of the drivers talked about, that they have committed to us that they're going to comply and will continue to comply with all state and federal regulations. And so that is something we expect them to be fully consistent with as well.
Yeah, just next, this company was founded in 2014.
Right.
Hi. I'm hearing a lot of talk about how we're gonna save a lot of money with this change, but I'm just wondering how exactly this affects students, since this is, I don't know much about Zoom, but yeah, how exactly will this affect all the students are transporting, since it's a major switch from traditional buses to like Uber, I guess.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that question. First of all, we're not proposing to transition from yellow buses to Zoom. Like I said, we're asking tonight the board to approve a $30 million contract for 230 buses with First Student. And we're also asking for $600,000 for 10 cars over a period of 18 months. And in order to explore some emerging needs, which we can speak a little bit about, Jennifer Font, if you want to talk about that, and then I can come back. I just want to say one thing before you do that about the student experience. We never think about just reducing costs. It's always reduce costs and improve services. It's the two. We wouldn't compromise the student experience. So with the Zoom, instead of an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old having to get on a yellow bus to get from home to school for a program that's to help them to transition to the work to life, they would now have a van service with an app where they could actually see when the van is coming, and their family would be able to see where the student is at all times when they're being transported. So that's some of the value add for students through the Zoom service, and I'll let Jennifer speak to some more about that.
Good evening. We're really excited to try to build, with Vision 2025, more college and career readiness for students. So for example, a van service would allow students to be transported from a small high school program to City College for dual enrollment. And we have been able to triple dual enrollment in recent years, and by reducing transportation barriers is one of those reasons. We're also excited to have students be transported from their high school to internship placements, maybe like at 1 p.m. And transportation can be a barrier for students if they're coming from a faraway place and trying to get to their internship. So we hope that the van service will really help with these kinds of actions.
Any other response?
Just in terms of, light duty vehicles, which there's concerns that's being raised about it, that is something that, a lot of partner districts are doing in order to improve services for students and provide more flexible means of transportation. And that's why we included it as part of the RFP.
Commissioner Lopez, and then Commissioner Lynn.
Hi, thank you for the information. I'm wondering about the reason behind separating students who are in special education and how and why we're still doing that, like how we can connect that to more efficient routes. So what is the background behind that?
Right, so if a student has on their IEP the transportation box checked, up until the middle of last year, it meant it was curb to curb service, so we would have to, I'd pick you up at your door and Commissioner Sanchez at his and so forth. There wasn't an opportunity to say, your child, that, you know, transportation services are required, and these are the types of options that we have available. Like there's the general education, or we could design hubs, or maybe even some cases, Muni and other modes of transportation are appropriate, but the form didn't allow for those conversations to happen. So we've just started to indicate that. I also want to say that a lot of the students with IEPs that are being transported have high needs, really high needs. So in some cases, they might have mobility issues. In other cases, they might need even a para to travel with them on the bus. So we are talking about our highest need students as well. So that's part of it. And then, as we pointed out earlier in the presentation, with our choice system and the fact that certain programs are only in 1 or 2 schools, and you know, we have to take students to wherever, you know, the program is that meets their needs, and is also the school that they're choosing. So it's kind of a variety of factors that created the current context.
Got it. And now that you have this option to find other routes, what does that look like? And how have people and families participated in that?
We haven't yet started to explore what Ms. Vaughn was talking about in terms of options. What we want is to try and pilot it this year, so that's why we're asking to see if we could enter into a contract for $600,000 over 18 months to start to pilot and see what it looks like, and then we can come back to the board and say how it's going. Like, is it working well for the students? Is it something that's improving services and reducing costs? And if it is, what are the implications for that? So aside from the work we're doing with Shoestrings, we don't have any other contracts that provide us with the flexibility to offer students van service.
Thank you for the presentation, the information, and just wanted to express, great job to the team for the work that you've all done around efficiencies. I mean, just one thing, it brought me back when you're talking about paper and fax. I mean, on the parent side, to be able to fill out those forms every time for a field trip, and to, let alone what administrators and educators have to go through every day in that paperwork. So those types of efficiencies are gonna be a better student experience at the end of it. I had particular questions around the next steps. I'm very interested around what that audit, the general education routes and services, and how those align with our policy goals. So I'm very excited to hear about those developments. My question is related around what's the plan for the family engagement or any focus groups that have occurred either with our special education CAC or just in general, because it sounds like from what Commissioner Lopez raised about the form. So what's kind of like peeling back on that? Like, what's the history, or where are we looking moving forward, be able to have that qualitative understanding of what the overall experience has been for students and for families, similar to I think what the food and nutrition team has done a tremendous amount of work, for example, related to our connection with our food vendor and our quality of food there. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Lamb. So a couple of different things. One, the rollout of the new process for the IEP is something that when you're trying to change at a systems level is really, really difficult, because it means that everyone that's involved, every teacher, every administrator, every paraprofessional, all staff that are involved in IEPs need to be aware of this change. And so that's something we're working with the special education department to roll out. We just took our first glimpse of the data, and it looks like at least a few dozen have checked something other than curb to curb, so that's promising. In terms of family feedback, unfortunately the majority of the conversations this year and earlier in the year were around on-time service. And luckily those issues have been addressed through strong working partnership with First Student and the changes that they have made. And we haven't yet begun to engage around kind of the routes and services and alternatives, but that is something that we will pay attention to.
Commissioner Lopez.
So I know that the public has been coming out in support of school buses, and I think I'm just wondering about the hit that they'll take. I haven't really heard numbers or how that's going to affect this shift. Do you have any idea what that looks like and what alternatives are?
I don't think what we're proposing will have any impact on the number of drivers with per student. Even though we're going to see a decline, there's been a struggle to make sure that we have enough drivers to provide all the services at the level that we're at today. And that's something that on an ongoing basis, kind of recruiting, hiring, training, and making sure there's enough drivers. So even though there's going to be a reduction, I think that it's going to match up with kind of the capacity to make sure that there are enough drivers for the services that are needed.
So Ms. Costo informed me that there's a parent in the audience who's a parent of a special needs student and would like to comment on this if there's no objection from the board.
I think there may be more than one of us, but I'm happy to take the opportunity. And I greatly appreciate your going up and Good evening, my name is Michelle Jacques-Menegas, and I speak to you now not as the PAC coordinator, but as the parent of a student with an IEP, who this last fall was placed at a non-public school in Palo Alto. Sorry, I made some notes, I'm just gonna look through quickly. First, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we spend so much money to send our students to schools outside of San Francisco on both tuition and transportation, and I emphatically believe that we need to be better at serving our students within our district and our city and much closer to home. It is not equitable to send students out of our city and district, sometimes with a 2+ hour commute. I'm reacting this way because of how deeply this impacted my family this year. Secondly, the process that I went through to get bus service lined up for my student was infuriating as a parent. It took 2 weeks, even though there was another student in the city that was attending that same school. I had to arrange for transportation for those first 2 weeks for my student, or they would have stayed at home unsupervised. The communication process with first student was archaic, and I had to do any proactive reaching out to get the answers that I sought. I have the skill set and the resources to do that. Not everyone does. In regards to Zoom, I have spoken to people and I've looked up responses in different districts that have used the service, and I have a personal friend in the Bay Area who, first her student, he had an injury, and he had a little scooter because he had a cast. And first he was transported in this other district by first student, and the drivers refused to assist him in getting the scooter up on the bus, and as a result he had to carry it up himself and further injured his foot. Then they got Zoom, and she was pleased. She could track, she got notifications when he was dropped off and picked up. The kid loved the rides. The driver communicated, hey, no problem, made sure he stayed off the foot, helped him with the scooter, all that kind of stuff. Please know that I have no negative feelings toward bus drivers. I greatly empathize with them. I'm gonna ask for just a couple more seconds. In fact, we absolutely loved our bus driver this year. This is really about how we're serving our students and families, and I would like for students to step up and acknowledge the fact that it's not about their drivers, and they're sending their drivers here to say, this isn't okay for us, but it's really not about the drivers, it's about the way they've done their business. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christina Scher, and I'm the parent of a kid with pretty serious cognitive disabilities, and listening to the talk about changes to transportation, I don't feel she'd be safe in a Zoom situation, in a hub situation. The safest place for her, and it really does matter, is on a school bus with a trained school bus driver, and it's distressing that that sometimes the buses were not coming. That would be wonderful if buses were fully staffed and had no issues in that way, but I really hope this is not opening the door to getting rid of school buses in our district. I know they're expensive, but like some students, they really need it.
Hi, thanks for taking the time to hear us. I'm a parent of a student with an IEP. He goes to a school. He goes to a school across the bay. And it's crucial that he has his school bus. And it's crucial that he has the transportation. Now, unlike our last speaker, my son is very intelligent, but he is autistic. And there are times that you may think that he could go on some other way, and he can't. And he experienced that this summer, where he was supposed to go on the T-line, and it was offline, and they had a bus going down Third, and he refused. He could not do it, okay? The other side is, our experience with this first student has been challenging. I understand the union and some of the system. When a new driver shows up unexpectedly, he does not want to get on the bus. He cannot experience those kinds of changes without knowledge. This year, prior years, there was an issue about him ending up at the depot and he freaked out. This year, a driver needed to use the restroom and stopped there, and I got phone calls of him panicking. Why am I here? Why am I here? How long am I going to be here? And then trying to get through an archaic system to get to somebody, because he comes back so late, who was in their office, who I could talk to. I don't know where he is on the bus. He comes home, we have a temporary driver from LA right now. Mom, we went on some strange route. I don't know where we went. I don't understand where we were getting to school. He does end up late sometimes. And I had to fight, and I'm appreciative to the people in the district who helped. Originally this school year, he was coming home 2.5 late hours to get home. He couldn't do homework, he couldn't study, he was a mess. And I'm grateful to people who helped us so that he can get to school on time and get home. And I just want to say one last thing. Currently, we have a temporary driver who this past week showed up with a bus that the emergency door didn't work, the windows couldn't go up. There are problems, and I hope that we can fix them in a way that supports our students. Thank you.
I'm speaking on behalf of a parent who is not comfortable standing up here giving public comment, but her son is severely impacted and rides the bus every day, and a bus is what the school bus is appropriate for him. But the challenge that they've found is there have been very many sweet bus drivers who have shown up to pick up her son this year, but it has been about a new driver every 2 weeks. And the last driver, who was fantastic and lovely, mentioned to her that she was here from LA for a 2-week stint. And then 2 weeks later, there's another driver. And I appreciate everything that First Student is doing to fill the vacancies and meet the needs of students, but for many of our students, especially those with communication and social issues, that change in personnel is very disruptive. And that school bus ride to school, that can either set a student up for a successful day, or it can derail them for a good solid couple hours, depending on the student and their abilities. I have a student who's heading to high school next year. I would love to see, as part of his transition plan, maybe some public transportation training. Why does it always have to be about school buses? Can we provide mentors that go with students who have higher cognitive functioning on school buses, not on school buses, but on public transportation, and give our students skill sets for later in life, starting in high school, wiping out the expense of the school bus altogether. The CAC welcomes the opportunity to partner and, as was mentioned earlier, do some kind of exploratory committee feedback. We'd love to participate in that. Thank you.
Student delegate, Godetta, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for everyone who stayed here all night long. I know it's been a long night, so I'll try to keep this very short. I think I mentioned earlier that, like, when I was also in elementary school, my family relied on school buses because my parents didn't have a car and I had no one else to take me to school, so I relied a lot on the school bus drivers. I was really grateful for my bus driver who, sometimes if a student didn't show up, she'd go back again to the student's spot that they were supposed to be picked up at. And she always made sure that we got to school on time, so I was really grateful for that. And also, I guess just my biggest concern around this is about the little ones, the ones in elementary school, especially like the really small ones, because I know that in a van, some might need a bumper seat, and so I'm just wondering if they were to do this van, would they be provided with bumper seats by the parents or by, Zoom?
I can answer that question. Currently, we are using Zoom for students ages 3 years old to 5 years old. They do have booster seats. They also have plush toys in the cars to kind of help with some transition issues. And the students that we're serving in Zoom are students that do not have IEPs, but they have some pretty intense behavioral issues. So they work very closely with those students. They provide a warm handoff and are they're welcome to feedback on how they can improve their services. And the smaller the vehicle, it feels better for the kid rather than a big van for the small child who's maybe one student in the car.
Do the parents request the car or does the school do it for them? Like, how does that process work?
So I can speak to how we're currently doing it with the Shoestrings program because it is a consistent schedule for the students. They are picked up at their preschool classroom, and then they're brought to the Shoestrings program, and then they're transported back to their classroom. So the parents bring them to the preschool program, but then Zoom transports them back and forth.
And thank you for that question. I just want to reflect on hearing the parents' compelling comment today as well, and many of them I've spoken to throughout the year to help them solve for their the challenges around transportation. It really will always be the parent's choice. I mean, transportation services will be offered during the IEP process, and what we are trying to do is make sure that we have more options for families, and so that we can help them solve some of the challenges and have the services be unique and flexible so that they can be responsive to whatever their particular students' needs are. So it would always be in conversation with parents as part of the IEP process.
Also, just want to acknowledge the comments from the parents and thank you, President Sanchez, for extending public comment for us to hear from them. I think it really comes down to families and families getting the support they need, people getting the support they need. Hearing a lot about the Shoestring program that we have an existing partnership with this company is compelling, and having trained drivers is compelling. Before my dad started driving for me, he was a paratransit driver. So I hear you. So trying to balance all these things, simultaneously is important. And I believe we want to appreciate the diligent work of the transportation team of trying to resolve all these issues as they're coming up, because we're talking about the difference between $2 million and we have a very serious deficit, but when you hear our parents and the type of community barriers they're having and the type of things that are coming up for their children, it does help to bring it all back to focus. So I do think it does make sense to move forward with the staff's recommendation. But I'd be the first to. I think it's unfortunate that I know it was a decision not to have someone from the company here. I think that was a mistake. We need to hold all these people accountable and be able to ask them questions directly. It's one thing to say you'll be in regulation with AB5. It's another thing for us to talk to you about your serious commitment to that at the outset, so we can all have it on the record. So we're talking about 1 year. I would recommend that this time next year, whoever we have a vendor partnership with is here before we vote.
They're here for students.
For students here.
Okay, great.
No, I mean the management, not the drivers.
No, the managers are here, the company.
Not the drivers.
Right, the managers are right there, there's two of them.
Okay.
Zoom is nowhere to be found.
Okay. I think Ms. O'Keefe was saying that she didn't invite.
No.
Thank you. came under the public. Commissioner Collins.
I've been listening to this and this is not an area where I have as much of a knowledge base, but it, honestly, it is concerning that, Zoom isn't here. I mean, we've had these contract discussions with Revolution Foods, and even when it got a little hot, like last year, they were here to answer questions directly, and whether they're invited or not, they know their own agenda, so I think that raises some concerns for me around being present and being accountable, not only to us as a board, but to the public. And just being a part of the community is being in the room. And then I guess additionally, I have questions and concerns on both sides around how to best meet students' needs, and sometimes the existing structures that we have in place don't meet student needs, and so we find workarounds, but ultimately we want to create a system that works, and that means fixing the actual system, and that means working with labor and within our different policies and requirements to make sure that our system works. But I also want to recognize that we may not always be able to do that when we have emergency kind of needs for students. And then additionally, I'm concerned about, I know students with specific needs like autism and things like that really need consistency and really need relationships. And that's a part of them feeling safe in the world and being functional when they arrive at school. And listening to families, I've gotten phone calls from my kids about like, where are you? And I don't know where I'm going, and the bus driver didn't pick me up, and that's just them as ninth graders, like getting to school. That is not students that experience terror and fear, when their routine is disrupted. And so it is, we can't always ensure that staff, we have the exact same person every single time because people get sick and people change jobs and things like that. But I think it's one of my utmost priorities that we have that sense of safety for both students and parents, because it's also terrifying for parents to receive phone calls like that. It's traumatizing. So I kind of wish that we could have the two separate conversations, and have one conversation about just like the general contract, and then have like another conversation. And I feel like, this is helpful dialogue, but it's another situation. It's kind of like right before we have to vote, and that also is concerning. And we can't know about every single thing that we're voting